Today on Mid-Maryland Votes, we're joined by Kai Burhans, a lifelong Frederick County resident and a District 2 County Council candidate. We talk about service over ambition, accountability in local government, and putting people before politics. Now let's get into it. Welcome to Mid-Maryland Votes. I am your host, Mark Flynn. With me is my co-host,
Lowen.
and we have a very distinguished guest here tonight. We have Kai Burhans, who is running for Frederick County Council.
Yep. Thank you for having me. Thank you. I'm running for Frederick County Council District 2. So I'm real glad to be out here and share my message with the Frederick County voters. So, I've been born and raised here in Frederick County. I've grew up my whole life here. I come from a little bit of a political household where my dad has served as the mayor of Newmarket for my entire life, as well as my family, who's always been locally involved in politics, as well as our community as a whole. So very, very excited to be here, very excited to be running the campaign and getting out there and conversating with the voters.
Question number one: do you have your father's endorsement? That's what I want to know.
I sure hope so. But I'll have to make sure that he's not thinking about supporting the other guys. But yeah, pretty safe to say I have his support.
So what areas is District 2 to our viewers who aren't familiar with Frederick County?
So District 2 is kind of like the southeastern corridor of Frederick County. If you really want to think about it, it's sets in between 270 and 70. So it encompasses Urbana over to Monrovia, up to Newmarket, parts of Lake Linganore, and then Mount Airy. Very interesting district because on one side you have a very conservative-leaning populace going towards the east side of the district, and then on the other side, if you use Newmarket as the dividing point, you have kind of a more centrist or Democrat base out there. So it's a very interesting Republican district.
You said that your father is the current mayor of Newmarket. And do you have other members of your family that also are involved in politics?
The rest of my family has always kind of been involved in politics. My great-grandfather was a 2-term Washington County commissioner and 3-term Hagerstown mayor, which is where Burhans Boulevard comes from if you ever go to Hagerstown. Like my grandmother was a part of a DC Republican women's group. My mom has always been very supportive of my dad's campaigns. And then, we've just always kind of been involved with community stuff as well.
I was going to actually mention Burhans Boulevard. Now I know where it comes from. Very interesting. And as a political family, you are familiar with the sacrifice that comes along with public service and office. What have you seen throughout your life that is the motivation for you to take this on at this point in time? Well,
it's just really being able to connect with people and form relationships, with the people that you want to serve. When I was young, long past family friend. Her name was Kathleen Snowden. She was my dad's first vice president of the town council. And she had always told me that helping others is good for your soul. And it kind of led to there. As I grew up, I got involved in my community, whether it was on our, green team or as now I'm a board member of our Rotary Club. It was always the will to help people, to serve people, to build relationships. And that's kind of where I fell in love with it. I feel like 90%, 95% of, being in politics is about forming relationships with people to get things done for your constituents. And, that's something where I feel like I can specialize in and really help Frederick County is, I can be a bridge builder to make sure we get things done for our voters.
Part of your campaign is that you're extremely pro law enforcement. Can you explain that to us? How would that take form if you got on the council?
So, law enforcement, public safety is a big issue in Frederick County. I mean, people want they want to have public safety. They want good communities. They want safe schools and good roads. So, law enforcement is all part of that. I think they need to be, I have what's called a prioritized spending agenda in my campaign, meaning we need to look at our budget from the top down and decide where is our wasteful spending, where can we reprioritize that spending appropriately to our critical, into what I'm calling our hierarchy of needs. So that falls within infrastructure, schools, our law enforcement, and even ag preservation if you're here in Frederick County, because that's a big part of our heritage. So, as far as law enforcement, we just need to make sure that we are funding them to their needs, to make sure that they have everything that they require so they can do their job and do it to the best of their ability. And I can tell you, they have kept Frederick County safe for a long time. We have a great sheriff here, and he's done his job very well. He's even given money back to the taxpayers, I believe. So, as far as supporting law enforcement, you'll see me as a voice, to back the blue. And, we are going to make sure that they have what they need when they come to the county for money.
And when it comes to the crime and should I say, the lack of crime, as you mentioned in Frederick County, because we have had Sheriff Jenkins on as well.
Several times.
Yes.
He's a friend of the show.
Yes.
Yeah. Great episodes too.
Thank you. And he's kind of a legendary sheriff, even on a national level at this point, not just locally. And of course, the level of crime on a per capita basis is amongst the top percentages in the country nationwide. A lot of what he says that is from, there's a number of reasons he mentions, but one of them is his participation in the 287G program, something that has become highly controversial just in the last few months because there are certain politicians that have become very loud about it. There on the council that you're running for, it also is a contentious issue with the president of the council, Jessica Fitzwater, taking a very strong stance against it. Sheriff Jenkins taking a very strong stance for it.
Yeah, well, I support the 287G program, and I'm not going to shy away from that. It's very clear. It's a very good due process program. It takes, people that aren't originally supposed to be here. It kind of gives them a second chance with committing a crime, and then obviously it processes them out, and, whether that's deporting them or, recognizing that they are citizens of this country. So, I support 287G. Our sheriff has worked hard to make sure people understand that it's not this snatch and grab program, that they're not putting, these chasing people down on the streets. Nobody wants that. This is a very safe program. So as far as I'm concerned, I support 287G. I may have my differences with others on the council about that, but they're just going to have to accept that and understand that we need to find a way to move forward together on this and not be so divisive towards each other as we've seen in the past couple of years, especially during the 2022 election.
It needs to be stressed for our viewers that the 287G program currently in effect and planned to be in effect in Frederick County is the jailhouse model. So the only persons coming into contact with ICE are people who are undocumented immigrants who have committed a crime and are being processed into the Frederick County jail. Street cops are not asking about immigration. Immigration status is not asked by the sheriff deputies as they respond to incidents. It is only after people have been charged with a crime will their immigration status be determined. And then if they are here illegally, then ICE would be contacted. That is the model of 287G that we use in Frederick County. And as you said, it has been highly effective. And as Ethan pointed out, the crime in Frederick County is one of the lowest in the 5-county area around us. A lot of that Sheriff Jenkins attributes to the 287G program.
You guys heard about it on when he was on your podcast about how, they had I want to say, was it ICE that had 65 targets within the Western Maryland region, and only 2 of them are in Frederick County, the most populous county out of all those counties. So I think that really says something about, how Frederick has handled the 287G program and keeping Frederick safe.
Right. And as the direct result of the participation in the 287G program, as you pointed out, Kai, ICE is not active in Frederick County. They don't have to be. Regular people who are in their homes have nothing to fear because ICE is nowhere around. They're waiting for people to be booked into the jails. That is actually a safer model.
I'd agree. And, again, it's thanks to our sheriff and thanks to the Frederick County Sheriff's Office that, they've kept us safe for a long time. And I hope that we continue that.
We are blessed to have them, and we're blessed to have the kind of living we have here in Frederick County.
As part of your campaign is what's called agritourism. Now, of course, economic development in Frederick County. Frederick County is doing fairly well economically, but there's always the future. There can always be better. Can you tell us a bit about what your economic plans for Frederick County are?
Yeah, well, I think number one, when it comes to, planning economically for Frederick County, number one, we need to expand our commercial tax base. Right now, you're seeing that we have about a tax base ratio of about 80-20 residential. We need to bump that up to about 70-30, 30% being the commercial. So, I mean, we need to start there so we can start taking some of the stress off of our residents and lower their property taxes. We really need to look at our budget, start with our budget as a whole and look at where we're spending money, see where we need to redirect wasteful spending. Most of the time, you'll find that wasteful spending is within government programs or just new government positions. So I think we need to definitely start with the budget, go with what I call prioritized spending, go down line by line, figure out where we can cut wasteful spending, sit down with the department heads, say, hey, where can we save money? And that's where we really start with the economic, development of Frederick County. Is we need to start with the taxpayers first. Then we also need to look at adjusting that tax base ratio. And then a part of that will be, supporting our agriculture. We really need to support our ag preservation programs to keep our farming heritage. We need to make sure that we are helping, get these farmers the money they need to put these farms in preservation. And I think that can all start from the budget. So in terms of ag tourism, I think it's just clear that we need to make sure we're allowing them to operate as any other small business and making sure that they have a clear path forward in terms of opening and operating. We're not over-regulating them. Their permitting process is quick, clean, and clear, and they're able to, operate their business as anyone else without any hindrance.
So agro-tourism is basically farmers markets, wineries.
Yeah, I mean, it's the wineries, the distilleries, breweries. You have the Gaver Tree Farm, the Summers Farm out in Middletown. These are all examples of the ag tourism. Farms with different attractions on them. To help bring in more profit for that family. So and they are a core piece of our county.
Agriculture is so important to Frederick County. It's on our seal. I mean,
yeah.
we are an agricultural first county.
Yeah.
When I say we, I'm talking you and I, Kai. Ethan's from Hagerstown.
Washington County actually is the largest agricultural county in the state.
Yeah, but you're from Hagerstown. That's not even Washington County. It's its own entity.
I mean, we have our own personality. That's for sure.
You do. Hagerstown's got its own personality. You can say that again.
With the tax base, you mentioned that currently it is 80% citizens paying taxes, 20% businesses, and you would like to bring that up to at least 30% businesses, 70% citizens, because of how that relieves taxes on everyday people in Frederick County. Can you explain that a bit more? Because that is a vital key of any community's economic development and essentially rarely ever gets even mentioned, much less discussed.
Right. So, I mean, you can look at some counties surrounding us and just other areas where they have a different tax base ratio and they have lower property taxes. So, examples of this is if we could bring in more commercial tax based revenue, that revenue can be used to lower, property taxes. In some case, let's say if this in your mind, if it's the data center industry that they're trying to bring into Frederick County or that they recently voted on the overlay for, if they were to receive I want to say it's $200 million in revenue from this data center overlay, that could be an example of where we can take that revenue and, use it to boost our tax-based revenue and use it to lower property taxes by, some estimates around like 15 cents. So, I think it's important that, we have to have a variety of ranges of revenue when it comes to taxes. We can't just, always be reliant on the homeowners because, that, in my opinion, isn't really prioritizing home ownership, which is something I think we need to do. We can't just keep going back into our taxpayers' wallets and say, give me more, give me more, give me more, give me more. We have to find other avenues to bring in more revenue so we can lower taxes here in the county.
Yeah, but to that point, Kai, you've got a lot of citizens that don't want this stuff in their own backyard, right? Not in my backyard is the statement. So how do you sell the fact that these businesses need to develop, they need to take land to do it, and it will be in somebody's backyard?
Right. So I think everyone needs to understand that we all need to share a little bit of the benefits and a little bit of the burdens in terms of living in a community together. Listen, I mean, it's nowhere near perfect in terms of the overlay. You could pick apart any little piece or parcel there, and same with any other industry that you would try to bring into Frederick County. I think people just need to recognize that we each have to bear a little bit of the burden, and we all get a piece of the benefit. When it comes to this overlay, one thing you can look at is it brings in a lot of revenue. It limits data center development in the rest of the county, only allowing it to be developed in that overlay area. So, you could look at that as you're taking on a little bit of the benefit and burden there. And, if it comes down to it, the community that's directly affected by that is saying, all right, well, hey, guess what? We'll build you a new school, that's away from this data center overlay. We'll, give you a rec center. We'll make sure that, your infrastructure is the first that's taken care of, because they're obviously shipping all these materials in and out to build these data centers. So I think it comes down to everyone just needs to understand that we, share the benefits and the burden of a community, and that while there are some costs that could possibly come about with this industry, we need to understand that again, this is a zoning tool. This isn't shovels in the ground. So there's still a long process to go when it comes to these data centers being built. But I think when they do get built, I think people will see that these are going to be a benefit with the tax revenue. We can fix a lot of issues within the school system. We can fix a lot of issues with the infrastructure. There's a lot of things we can do with that. And as long as we just maintain good regulations on these data centers, making sure they're not butting up to people's properties like you see in Loudoun County, I think that'll be something that people will quickly realize is like, oh, this really isn't that big of a deal. But I understand why they're upset about it. You're taking a lot of good farmland, that they have lived around, possibly for their entire life, or they moved here for that specific reason, and now it's kind of in their eyes being taken away. So I just think we need to take this one day at a time, and just realize that we all live in this together. There's going to be other areas of the county where people don't want something developed. It's going to be good for everybody. So we're just going to have to understand that we have to share the benefits and the burdens of our community.
And I think that the data center overlay is a perfect real life illustration for what your economic plans are for the county. So what it is that for those who are not familiar, in Adamstown, which is on the south side of Frederick County, there is an Amazon data center, not warehouse, but data center that is going up about 2,600 acres, I believe, is the current size, and which is very large. Now, what ends up happening is that it uses a lot of resources. It uses a lot of electricity, it uses a lot of water, and of course, it's massive in size. 2,600 acres is huge. So you, of course, as always, end up with the eternal NIMBY situation, not in my backyard. But at the same time, this is something that for the finances of Frederick County is a real game changer. Did you say it would be $200 million in additional revenue to the county that Amazon would be paying on an annual basis?
It would be around, from every estimate I've seen, it's around $200 million in revenue, tax-based revenue. So, I mean, and you're not even talking about, the possibility of them adding on there's a new data center tax that was introduced by County Councilman McKay, a couple months back. It has to get voted on, from what I understand, in Annapolis. So if the county wanted to enact it, they have to see if the legislation will vote for it. But that could bring in another estimated $100 million in revenue. But I mean, $200 million in revenue, I mean, that's like 20% of the county's budget. That's a lot of money. That could fix a lot of issues that we have. And, we don't have to end up like Loudoun County, where you have data centers quite literally all over the place. I remember going down there a couple of months ago and, working with my dad, installing some cabinets. And, I'm sitting there, I'm like, I see house and I see data center. That's not what you're going to have here in Frederick County. What this is, I think people will be able to see, like the light at the end of the tunnel, that, hey, this isn't going to be all bad. We just need to make sure we have proper regulations in place.
That's awesome, Kai. I'm glad you're addressing that issue. And you're right. That revenue could really help out the entire county. One issue you're going to have, Kai, as you get closer to the election is you're going to have to convince a lot of Democrats to vote for you. And also, you're going to have to get younger people re-engaged because younger people seem to be checked out. So those two demographics you need to address. What's your plan for that?
Well, I have a slight advantage in one of those demographics, and I'll start with the younger people. And it's, I think, one of the most important issues facing my generation and the younger half of the generation before me is going to be this cost of living, cost of housing issue that we're going through. You know, we can't find a place to live here in Frederick County. You know, I'm lucky to be a homeowner because, you know, I ended up with a family property that I bought, but most of my friends, you know, are all moving away to, you know, Pennsylvania, Florida, Tennessee, any place that has, you know, more affordable living, they're moving there. And we really need to start addressing some of those concerns, you know, and I think the parents of Frederick County should really be concerned about that their kids aren't going to be able to find a place to live here in Frederick County.
Oh, believe me, Kai, the parents know it because we got our kids living in our basement.
Yeah. I mean, all my friends,
we want affordable living just like everybody else.
Yeah, I mean, all my friends are either living with their parents or they're all grouped up in one small apartment with a bunch of them, or they've moved out of state at this point. And it's kind of sad because it's like, I'm looking around, it's like, where are all my friends going? So, you know, I think there's a couple things we need to address in terms of affordable housing, a couple things we need to fix, you know, and that can start with these. I've identified 3 things that we can start trying to fix immediately, which is strict zoning regulations, fees that can get passed from home developers to home buyers, and the need for government to invest in infrastructure. And part of that would come from the, you know, boost in tax revenue that we could get from, you know, having more commercial tax base. So, you know, it can take years to get projects approved. It takes a lot of money. You know, we require the construction industry to build out all the schools and infrastructure and other offsite projects. So, you know, all those costs are going to get passed down to the home buyer. So, you know, we really need to prioritize home ownership by telling the government, hey, you guys need to, you know, look at your budget, quit spending money all over the place, and prioritize it to our needs. What are our critical needs being infrastructures and schools, so we can take these costs away from being passed off onto the home buyer. I mean, I want to say a single family townhouse here in Frederick County has impact fees around, you know, upwards to $40,000, which is more than a single family house. So, you know, I want to be clear. I'm not saying that the construction industry shouldn't, you know, invest in infrastructure, but the government needs to start prioritizing that too if we're going to solve this affordability issue. Yep. And so for the reaching voters on both sides of the aisle, I mean, I've worked my entire life to build relationships with people. It doesn't matter whether you're, you know, Green Party, Democrat, Republican, Independent, Libertarian, you know, I can always try and find a way to be friends with somebody. And, you know, I've got a lot of Democrat support already, you know, local councilmen here that are going to be supporting me, you know, because they see that it's not about whether Frederick County is, you know, going to be, you know, all Republican or all Democrats. How do we bring the best results for the people of Frederick County? We have to understand that not everyone's a Republican, not everyone's a Democrat. We have to work together. And that's going to be my messaging, you know, to the independents, to the Democrats, and saying, hey, listen, you may not agree with me 100% of the time, but I can guarantee you care about having good schools, you care about having good public safety, and you care about having good communities. And those are 3 things we can get along on. And my campaign covers all 3 of those. So I really think that, you know, Democrats and people on the other side of the aisle for me who may question voting for me, you know, are going to be able to look at me and be like, this is a Republican I can vote for. You know, he's someone that's going to represent us all. You know, I have to get 50.1% of the vote to win, but I have to represent 100% of the people. So, and I think people will see that when it comes to election day.
And the affordability issue, I think, is top of mind, not just of younger individuals, but everyone. I was told that over the summer, one of the county council meetings, one of the county councilmen stated that about 1/3 of property owners in Frederick County are actually not paying their property taxes, unable to. Skyrocketing property taxes. We have utility bills that are going up very high. It's affecting large percentages of the population. These are basic cost of living issues that affects everyone on the spectrum. Because of these costs, very much of which are related to taxes, if budgeting can be taken down and if more efficient tax revenue from businesses can come in, then that actually can relieve a lot of these expenses. So is that correct? I mean, it seems like essentially what you're describing is that there is a cascading effect where within all of these expenses are not random, they are all connected in a cycle. And if you pick the right part of the cycle to improve, everything in every area of people's lives improves as a result.
Yeah, I mean, it all starts with the budget. We have to get our money in order, and we have to make sure that we're spending in the appropriate areas. Infrastructure, schools, public safety. For Frederick County, in my opinion, you can throw in ag preservation there because that's a big part of our heritage here in Frederick County. So yeah, it all starts with there. The government, back in my grandfather's day, they used to actually invest in infrastructure, go out and float bonds, and we no longer do that. We rely a lot on, developer money when it comes to, building the infrastructure with these new big developments. And what happens when that happens is you're going to get your housing first and you're going to get your infrastructure second, because nobody's going to out all that money to hope that they can build these houses and then make their money back. They want to get their money first and then, obviously build up that infrastructure. So, I think, again, it comes down to a couple key things. Is we really need to start investing in our infrastructure. We really need to look at that budget and start cutting a lot of wasteful spending, reduce the amount of new government programs we're introducing, reduce the amount of bloat within the government itself. I wish we could, take a deeper dive into the Board of Education's budget, because I think we could reduce a lot of waste there. But unfortunately, in Maryland, you have a law that does not allow you to cut funding. From what I understand, it's mandate of effect or something like that, where they require you to, if you spent that money last year, you got to spend it again. So unfortunately, until that changes, it's going to be pretty tough. But from the county council side, yeah, if we can cut a lot of wasteful spending and redirect that money to other areas of need, establishing a hierarchy of needs, we will be able to bring down the cost of living and, the cost of housing. And another thing I think we need to add on top of that is Maryland needs to get serious about being more energy independent too, and start producing some more of its own energy. Now, obviously, as county councilman, I've got no real control over that. I've certainly got some state delegates and state senators that we can, work with to say and advocate for certain policies, but we really need to change that as well and get our governor and our supermajority in the state legislature to say, hey, these environmental energy policies aren't working. We need our nuclear reactors online, and we need to start looking at something more efficient, so that way we can start taking down our energy dependency.
You did mention the school board, and that, of course, can be another 10 hours here. But something about the school board is that it is about 50% of the county's budget. So when we talk about taxes, the cost of living, everything that goes into it, 50% of that is being affected by our schools.
Yep.
And when it comes to the cost of the schools, just a kind of an indicator of how much of a savings there could be is that the #1 charter school in Maryland is located in Frederick City. Charter schools in Maryland have all the costs of the public schools. They use public school employees, public school pensions, healthcare, all of those costs. And yet they are only able to spend 86 cents on the dollar that the public schools are. So just as an indicator for our viewers about the vast sum of savings that are possible, we have already schools in Maryland that are operating 16% lower than our public schools are. There was also another change that happened on the school board. I don't know if you have any comments about it, but there was a school board member that just retired recently, and a new school board member was appointed today. Seems to be a controversial appointment. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I'll step aside as a candidate and step in as the Frederick County Young Republican chairman. So what I will say is I am disappointed in the appointment of Mr. Wilson. I think I think he's a nice guy, but the reality is they gave an incumbency advantage to an active candidate that's filed in this upcoming election. I really think that there was I don't have all the names memorized, but there was a large list of people who filed. I think that the county executive could have chosen any one of them who wasn't running currently to fill the seat. And I also think she should have probably tried to chose someone who was a little bit more independent minded or conservative leaning, as Nancy Allen, who was the outgoing board member, was clearly a conservative school board member. I mean, she represented our voice, all alone for 2 years. So I just think that, number one, there shouldn't have been a current candidate that's running picked, and then number two, I think we should have had at least someone that was more lenient towards conservative policies to fill out the remainder of that board. So it is what it is at this point. I believe it's in the county council's hand to confirm. So if any Frederick County residents are concerned about this and would like them to reject this choice, certainly make sure you email them or go to the next county meeting and let them know. But
in this particular case, Nancy Allen was a non-teachers union board member that the public appointed or elected. And of course, in this most recent election, the voters of Frederick County voted 2 of the 3 members up for election. 2 of them they voted in as non-teacher union board members. Yep. And so essentially the election, the voters have kind of made their voice known that they want to move away from these teacher union board members to non-teacher union board members. And the person who was appointed is actually on the board of the state teachers union. So something that does fly directly in the face of how voters in Frederick County and across Maryland have voted for the last 2 elections.
It smacks of corruption. I mean, when you appoint an interim person to the board who is already filed and is a member of the teachers union, they're out of the box. They don't care. They don't care what people think. They're gonna put their agenda in there one way or the other.
Yeah, there's definitely some conflict of interest there. Again, it's just unfortunate that a candidate had to be selected, particularly a candidate who is ideologically aligns with our county executive, who was also a teacher herself. So, it's disappointing, but, we have to kind of move forward from it at this point. I saw a lot of Republicans out there saying, oh, well, there goes our chance to flip the board. Well, just because he's appointed doesn't mean he keeps the seat. So, people just need to get out there. They need to educate themselves on the Board of Education. They really need to understand who their representatives are going to be and just get out there and vote for them. And, I commend the Democrats on one thing, and that's every general election there, it's whoever's on the ticket is who they're going with. They don't fight. You don't really see them. They may take it up behind closed doors, but, they are all in when it comes to the general election. And the Republicans need to do the same when it comes to this year's general election. And, really for the BOE race in both the primary and generals, Republicans got to get behind our candidates. We have to push them forward into the general, and we have to at least get these 2 seats.
Well, Kai, you've been an excellent guest presenting yourself as a viable candidate for this position. And I thank you for coming on the show.
I thank you for having me.
What is the schedule for the election, and how can people help you?
Well, I'll tell you. So if you want to help me, you can email me at all lowercase citizens number 4 Kai Burhans at gmail.com. You can email me, or you can get in touch with me via my cell phone, 240-372-6670. Shoot me a text, give me a call, and we'll be happy to get you on the team. I can tell you, as far as the schedule goes for campaigning here these next couple of months, it's going to be hitting a lot of doors, meeting a lot of people, and just making sure I'm up to date with all of our farmers and business owners and everyone in this district, and make sure that they recognize that I'm going to represent them well on the county council, and that they need to support this campaign so we can make the best possible future for Frederick. www.kaiburhans.com is my official website, as well as you can follow me on Facebook at Kai Burhans for Frederick County. So you can follow me on those. You can stay up to date with the campaign. And if you want to help, reach out. We'll be happy to get you on board. And, I think we're really going to pick up some momentum, and we're really going to, push through the general.
Thank you very much for joining us on Mid-Maryland Votes.
And thank you for having me. Yeah, I'll have to do an update after I win the primary. So,
all right, that's been this edition of Mid-Maryland Votes. I'm your host, Mark Flynn. With me is my co-host,
Ethan Lowen.
And we thank Kai Burhans for being on the show. Good luck in the future, Kai, and thanks again for being on Mid-Maryland.
That wraps up Mid-Maryland Votes with Kai Burhans. Local government shapes our daily lives, and voters deserve transparency, accountability, accountability, and straightforward answers from anyone seeking public office. Like, follow, and share for more content like this, and find Mid-Maryland Votes on both Facebook and YouTube, where real conversations still matter. See you next time on Mid-Maryland Votes.